Hello, Tony. Thank you for being with us. And I want to say here, I am Anne Baxter in the lobby of the Foster with the large sepia photograph of you painting at Kiter Falls, your luminary, Bill Brace. I just wanted to say a little something about Bill because he not only was a great friend, but he was so very distinguished in his professional life too. He was a professor of the Department of Earth, Atmospheric, and Planetary Sciences at MIT for many years. And in fact, he merged departments to create that department. And he's widely recognized for his achievements, many awards. And he's renowned not only for his professional life, but also for his love of the outdoors and especially rocks. So I was just thinking he must have been obviously an incredible companion for you over the years. He was on many journeys.
He was, so, and the marvelous thing was that, of course, he always was available to explain the landscape to me. He'd say, "Do you know what you're looking at now, Tony?" And I'd say, "Well, yeah, I know what I'm looking at from the point of view of what I want to paint." But and then he would explain why the land had ended up looking like it did. And so he was a marvelous companion because it meant that if I was in some doubt about which form went over what other form, he would always be able to point it out to you. He'd say, "Well, if you look at this, and he'd explain the whole thing, which was a marvelous asset, really, as far as I was concerned."
Did it help you with your paintings also, or just, I guess, to understand more fully what you're looking at was helpful?
Yeah, that was it mainly. But when it came to him helping to choose a site, for example, no, he never helped do that because he always used to try. He would say, "Well, I know what you're looking for, I think," and he would go off and he'd come back and he'd say, "Look, I think I've found what you're looking for." And then we'd go off and see it, and I'd say, "No, sorry, Bill, that doesn't work." And I don't think he ever managed to find a site for me. I always found my own sites, and then he'd say, "Well, what is it about that?" And I'd explain to him what it was that had inspired me about a particular place. And even then, he probably wouldn't get it until he actually saw the painting halfway through, and then he'd say, "Oh, now I get it. I understand now what it was you saw." And so it was interesting, relationship.
Perspectives.
Relationship between art and science, really.
Well, I was wondering, you're such a good storyteller. Perhaps you can reflect on a couple of just special challenging moments or memorable moments of your time in the Grand Canyon with Bill. And I will say one thing that struck me is reading some of the details is, I guess it was either in 88 or 89, maybe when you're taking that rugged journey, you said Bill in the morning would get up and run across the canyon to the rim and then back again just to get started for the day.
Well, that's not strictly true. Even Bill wasn't quite such an Iron Man as that. But I can remember him saying one day as we were hiking along there, I mean, most people, take 2 days to get from the bottom to the top, and a day to get from the top to the bottom. And Bill one day just happened to remark, because he was an absolute Iron Man, and he happened to remark, "Well, I can remember one day when we ran the canyon from the north rim to the south rim." And I said, "Good God, how long did that take?" And he said, "Oh, well, it didn't take very long." So I said, "Well, how long?" And he said, "Well, it can't have been that long." He said, "Because we were gone up to the south rim in time for breakfast." And I said, "Bill, that's impossible." And he said, "Well, no, we started early. We started at dawn, so it was about 5 o'clock, and it was a late breakfast, about 11 o'clock. So they'd run right down from the north rim to the river and back up then to the south rim and in time for breakfast, which I mean is just inconceivable to me. I couldn't imagine how you could do such a thing. And I mean,
you even feel like eating breakfast afterwards.
Yeah, quite. Yeah. Good point. We relied on Bill enormously because the canyon is actually a much more complicated place than you think, because you can get into side canyons and so on, and you're never quite sure after a day's hiking, you're never quite sure how many side canyons you've been into. And so you can easily think you're in a different one than the one you are in. And I remember, of course, we always took advice from the rangers before we started about where we could find fresh water, because, of course, that's always the question down in the canyon. Most people who die in the canyon die of dehydration. So it's good to know. And so we would mark on our maps where there was a chance of getting water. We'd been hiking for about 15 days, I think. And we were relying on a source of water from one of the side canyons. And when we got there, there wasn't any. We just couldn't find any water, and we had run out. And so we were a bit despondent, and we said, well, we'll split up. One of us go up canyon, and I said, I'll go down canyon, you go up canyon, and see if we can find anything, see if we can find a spring or anyway. I went down canyon, sort of bushwhacking really, and found this hideous looking pool of water about the size of a bucket really, full of this green slime really, with all sorts of animals and insects, dead animals in it, insects and all sorts of horrible stuff, the occasional frog. And I met them back at the trail, and I said, well, I found this. What have you found? They said, I haven't found anything. No, there's nothing up there at all. So I said, well, I found this sort of bucket full of sludge. And so we went back down to it, and I took my shirt off. We strained this through my shirt several times to get the biggest bits out of it. And then we were left with sort of what looked like pea soup. And we then put iodine in it and boiled it for about 5 minutes, and then put extra tea bags in so that the flavor wouldn't be too horrible, and drank that. But those, well, yeah, and those are the sort of things that happen when you go really off the beaten track, which is what we were. So things like that were just part of the mythology really that we had between us for all those years we traveled together.
Well, anyway, so it's fitting that Bill, who figured so large in your life for so many years, is your luminary for this Grand Canyon section of Exploring Beauty, and also the inspiration for 23 days painting the canyon from West Navajo Point, because that is your largest work today.
Yeah.
It measures 5.5 feet by 8 feet, including the souvenirs and the mats, and the sheet of the watercolor itself is 4 feet by 7 feet. It's one solid sheet.
Yeah.
So it's quite an undertaking. Very nice ode to Bill. And I wanted to ask you one thing. So part of the Grand Canyon exhibition also includes a little painting from west of Navajo Point looking west that was painted just in one day in May of 2013, right before you started the larger piece.
Well, before I started anything, I mean, I knew that that enormous painting was going to be a huge commitment, and it's not the kind of commitment you make without being absolutely certain that that's what you need, what you want to do. It's too painful and too taxing to try to do such a thing if you weren't sure that it's the right place. And so I started at Navajo Point. Mike Buchheit is the photographer for the Grand Canyon Association, and a good friend. And I was talking to him, and he knows the canyon like very few other people do. He's done many backcountry routes. He's spent far more time in there than I ever have. And his life has been there really, and taken some wonderful photographs. And so I was talking to him, and I said, look, what I need is a place where I can be quiet, where I shan't be barged into by loads of tourists, but which gives me an enormous view, preferably with the river in it. And so he suggested Navajo Point. And so I went there to have a look at it, and I thought, well, yeah, this will work. And I did that little painting just to test that theory that there was enough there to just what position you would sit at and so on. That was just a day to do that. But I thought, well, you can't just take the first thing you see. You've got to go and do a bit of bushwhacking yourself and see what else there is to find. And so I did a lot of bushwhacking for the next 3 or 4 days, and did a little painting every day from whatever I found. But then in the end, I looked at it and I thought, no, that Navajo Point is definitely the place. And so went back there and set up that enormous drawing board, as you say, 7 feet by 4, and started work. Yeah.
see, we always want to ask about the souvenirs. There are always special souvenirs. So this one, this painting has a very large series of painted objects that you painted in watercolor and graphite that you borrowed from the Grand Canyon Museum. And you always like to specify they're from the museum and not lifted from, found in the canyon or whatever.
Yeah.
And why did you choose those particular objects?
Well, first of all, to go back to that other point, very often in the canyon and in other national parks too, I've come across things which you look at and think, oh, I'd love to own that. I mean, in the canyon, Bill and I were scoping out a site one day, in the back country, way off the tracks, and I found this beautiful polished stone hand axe or axe. It was a beautiful thing. It was about, what am I going to say, 6-8 inches long and a beautifully polished thing. And of course, your first instinct is to think, oh my God, put it in your backpack. But I never do. I photographed it, left it where it was, and reported it to the rangers when I got back. Because of course, once it's taken out of its context, it's no longer, it no longer can tell anybody anything. If it ended up in my house, when I die, nobody know what the hell it was, or where it came from. So it wouldn't make any sense. And in the case of the souvenirs, which are in that big painting, the point I was trying to make really was that the canyon has been there for a very long time, and people have lived in it for a very long time. And the national park really is only the most recent manifestation of human interaction with the place. It was for thousands of years. It was a home to tribal cultures which lived there perfectly happily for many, many hundreds or thousands of years. And so what I was trying to extract from the museum was evidence that people had always been there, and so that's and of course in many cases there still are. I mean, the Navajo, for example, own a large chunk of it. The Havasupai still live in the canyon, and long may they do so. I mean, that's a healthy ecosystem, I think. That is not just the national park who own it; it's other people too.
Yeah. So there's one other aspect to the Grand Canyon section, and that's the 7 days rafting the Colorado River. And the continuation of the title is "No One Ever Steps into the Same River Twice" by Heraclitus, 500 BC. And that was done not in 2013, but a year later in 2014. And just was wondering about rafting in general. You've rafted down the Colorado River and seen the Grand Canyon and painted it from that aspect. How many times? 3 times now or more? 3 times?
3 times, yeah. Yeah, 3, yeah.
And what's the rhythm of the day when you're rafting with you're a part of the team getting down the river with the supplies and all that, and everyone's with you for that. And then where do you paint? How do you fit that in? Because you paint a painting each day also.
That's right. Well, it's a matter of scrambling, really, because generally you come into camp because your campsites are designated before you start, generally speaking. There's a little flexibility, but not much. So you have to follow a pattern which has been designated for you. So that people don't beat each other half to death over who gets what campsite. And so we come into camp about 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, put up our tents, put up the camp, put up the kitchen, and then I would rush off and go and try and find.
Taking a break, and you're
no breaks.
No.
Rush off and try and find something to paint, and I'd be scrambling about on the rocks and wandering up and down as far as I could go. Of course, your site is pretty narrow, pretty small. I mean, you haven't got a huge area to explore because it's limited by the fact that you come to a sheer rock falling into the water.
Yeah.
And so I walk about until I found a suitable site that worked. Then I start work until dusk. I'd rush back to camp. By that time, most people would have had their supper and they'd have kept mine warm for me, and I would sit and eat it and have a drink, and then go to bed. Get up about 4:30 in the morning, eat, eat, no, not eat anything, have a cup of tea, go back to my painting site, paint until I heard somebody beating on a tin lid. Tony, breakfast! And then I'd pack up and run back, and that would be the only chance I would get. And that would use generally about 7:30 in the morning, 8 o'clock. Eat my breakfast, scramble to put, take my tent down, wrap everything up, put it all in my dry bag, throw it into the raft, and jump in the raft, and off we'd go. Generally, I was always the last person in the raft because everybody else was sitting in there waiting for me to get my stuff packed and in to go. So it was always a scramble, really, and I was always greatly relieved when we got to the end of the journey and I'd actually managed to get a painting for every day.
Yeah. Well, they're a nice size. It's a doable size. It's not 4 feet by 7. They're more like
no, that's true.
2 feet, about 24 inches or whatever.
Yeah.
So one thing that people noticed in the series here is you have glass vials, souvenirs of the water you collected each day. And in Camp 3, I was reading the notes, and I wanted to ask you about that because the water in the vial is a little bit blue. And reading your journal notes, it says bodies surfing in the turquoise waters of the Little Colorado, past Tanner Beach, where BB, Bill Race, and PH Parker Huber and I first hiked in 1988.
Yeah, the Little Colorado, which is very sacred to, I think, several Native American tribes, but particularly to the Navajo, is the most exquisite place. It's a rushing river, which, if it wasn't next to the Colorado, would feature as a major river. And you pull your rafts into the confluence of the two rivers, and then hike up the river, up the Little Colorado, and the water is turquoise. It is the most exquisitely beautiful turquoise color, and it's got a lot of mineral salts in it, I think. And it's rushing over all these boulders. And of course, the backdrop is the reddish wall of the Supai, I think it is. But anyway, it's the dark reddish color of the canyon wall against this turquoise of the water, and then vegetation, of course, fed by this stream. It is the most exquisite thing. It is like entering nirvana or something. I mean, it is just beautiful. And then you have your life jacket with you. You strap your life jacket onto your backside like a great giant nappy, and then you, or what do you call them, diaper, like a diaper, and you jump into the water and get washed down, bumping over the rocks and so on, and you end up at the confluence between two rivers. And so that was a sample of the Little Colorado, and that is the color it is. I mean, it's just exquisite. And then where it runs into the reddish river of the Colorado, you can see for quite a long way where the two rivers don't mix. There's the beautiful turquoise water running next to the red water, and then eventually, of course, they mix together, and you lose that influence. But it looks like magic. It really does.
Sounds like magic.